What the hell do you think you're doing with my father? Julian Blackwell's voice cracked through the glass atrium like a thunderclap in a chapel. The front door hadn't even fully closed behind him when his polished leather shoes struck the marble. His coat still clung to his shoulders from the plane ride, but his face burned with something older than travel fatigue. Rage. At the center of the garden room, bathed in morning light, stood Selena Grant, arms wrapped around the thin, trembling frame of Harold Blackwell. His legs had just given out mid-step. One hand still gripped the walker, the other clutched at her sleeve. Their bodies were close, too close from Julian's vantage point. Selena's eyes widened. It's not what it looks like, but Julian had already crossed the room in 5 long strides. Are you out of your mind? He barked. Throwing yourself on a sick old man in his own home. What kind of scam are you running? Selena flinched as he towered over her. Mr. Blackwell asked me to help him walk this morning, that's all. His therapy. Don't you dare lie to me, Julian growled, stepping between them. I leave the country for 3 weeks and come back to this? You grinding against my father like you're earning a promotion? Harold, still catching his breath, tried to raise a hand. Julian, but his son wasn't listening. You gold-digging little snake? Julian spat, his voice cracking. I knew it! You're not a nurse, you're an actress. And this is your audition, isn't it? He shoved Selena back. The motion wasn't theatrical. It was violent. Her elbow struck the edge of a glass planter, and a streak of blood painted down her arm. Gasps rippled through the hallway. The butler, the housekeeper, and even the gardener had gathered at the edge of the corridor. And they had seen. Selena sat up slowly, gripping her bleeding forearm. She tried to find her breath. His in-home therapy was cut 3 weeks ago. Insurance revisions. Budget changes. Mr. Blackwell asked me to help keep him moving. We've been following the rehab plan Dr. Levin created. Julian's expression didn't budge. You expect me to believe that? That my father, Harold goddamn Blackwell, would entrust his recovery to the Maid? Because no one else would help him, she snapped. He was rotting in that chair until I stepped in. Julian's face twisted. Then he reached out and grabbed a fistful of her hair, dragging her halfway to her knees. A chorus of shouts erupted from the doorway, staff members calling his name, telling him to stop. Selena gasped in pain. Let me go! I want you out of this house, Julian hissed. Now, pack your things, and if you're still here in an hour, I'll call the police and have you charged for harassment. Or worse. Julian! Harold tried again, louder this time. But Julian didn't move. That's when the old man slammed his palm against the walker with a sound that echoed across the atrium. That's enough! Julian froze. And then came the quietest voice in the room. She saved my life, Harold said. A long silence. The staff stopped breathing. Selena stood, trembling, her hand still on her chest where his grip had loosened. Her arm throbbed. Julian blinked. She what? I said, Harold replied, his voice thin but sharp. She's the reason I still have legs to stand on. When your money, your managers, your cost-saving spreadsheets left me to rot. Julian turned pale. You see a woman standing beside me and assume she wants what you hoard, Harold continued. But all she did was pick me up when I fell. He turned toward Selena now, lifting his gaze to meet hers. You have nothing to apologize for. Selena nodded faintly, her breath coming in slow waves. Julian looked between them, eyes narrowing. The shame hadn't hit yet. But it would. For now, he simply stormed out, coat still half draped across his arm. The butler followed him in silence. The staff scattered like shadows. Selena stood in the empty atrium, glass shimmering all around her, and thought only one thing. If truth has a voice, today it barely whispered. Selena didn't cry. She didn't pack, not yet. She just stood there for a long time, alone in the greenhouse atrium that still smelled faintly of rosemary and glass cleaner. Her arm throbbed where the edge of the planter had sliced it open. But it wasn't the pain that made her dizzy. It was the look in Julian Blackwell's eyes. Not rage, not jealousy. Something worse. Contempt. She was invisible to him until she became inconvenient. Selena moved quietly back to the guest wing. Her steps echoed. No one followed. She passed portraits of the Blackwell family lining the hall. Julian's father in his prime, Harold Blackwell, steel-eyed and statuesque, and next to him, a young Julian smiling like he still believed the world was fair. In her room, she closed the door, peeled off her cardigan, and began cleaning the wound with tissues and bottled water. No antiseptic. No bandages. She hadn't expected to bleed today. The suitcase at the edge of her bed had already been half-packed before the morning exploded. She looked at it for a long time. A life folded in tight rectangles. Then came the knock. Soft. Not the knock of a man demanding anything, a different rhythm. She opened it. Harold Blackwell, in his wheelchair, slumped slightly, but eyes burning bright. "I asked Alan to bring me down," he said. "I couldn't let you walk out thinking you were alone." She helped him roll inside. The air between them smelled of lavender and quiet defiance. "You shouldn't be out of bed," she said. "I shouldn't be a lot of things," he murmured. "But I'm still alive, and people who are alive don't need pity. We need purpose." Selena looked away. "I failed you today," Harold said after a beat. "I should have spoken sooner." "You did enough," she replied. But her voice didn't quite carry conviction. "No, I didn't. I let him believe I was just an old man with broken bones and soft memory. But he's not the only Blackwell in this house with teeth." Selena raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know you still had fight left in you." He chuckled, then winced. "Hurts to laugh, but better than not feeling anything at all." She turned serious. "You know he'll never respect me." "I know," Harold said softly. "But I will, and this house answers to me." He reached into his sweater pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "This was supposed to be part of a quiet change to my estate plans, but maybe it shouldn't be quiet anymore." Selena hesitated before taking it. Inside was a legal draft, signed, dated, confirming her new role. Director of Personal Rehabilitation and Transitional Care. Not a title of service. A title of authority. Her hands shook. "I don't want your money," she said quietly. "This isn't about money," Harold replied. "It's about recognition. My son sees me as an asset in decline. You saw me as a man who still had a few steps left." Selena looked up, jaw set. "He'll think this is about inheritance." "He already does," Harold said. "Let him." Silence stretched between them. Then she spoke, carefully. "You know he's going to hate me for this." Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then let him. If he can't see the difference between control and care, he doesn't deserve to inherit either." Upstairs, Julian sat in his father's study, staring at the family portrait on the mantel. His jaw was locked tight. His reflection in the glass didn't blink. The old Julian, the loyal son, the heir, the protector, was nowhere to be found. His fingers drummed the armrest once, twice. Then he picked up the house phone. "Alan," he said, "what's the legal status on my father's will?" The butler hesitated. "Sir, I want to know if anyone's been added." A pause. "I believe you'll want to speak to Mr. Prescott, your father's lawyer." Julian hung up. His eyes returned to the portrait. His father's eyes. Once full of pride. Now, when they looked at him, they seemed full of warning. That night, Selena sat by the guest room window with the envelope still in her hand. She didn't cry. But something inside her cracked quietly. Not pain. Not even fear. Grief. Not for what had happened today, but for how quickly one man's power could make a woman like her feel small. How easy it was for the world to twist the story, when the woman standing was poor and black and didn't belong to anyone. She folded the envelope and placed it in the drawer. For now, there would be a time to open that fight. But not tonight. Tonight she needed to rest, because tomorrow she would rise, and this time, not as a maid, but as the only person in that house who still knew what care looked like. The next morning came soft and gray. Selena stood in the kitchen before sunrise, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The coffee had gone cold, but she hadn't moved. Outside the wide windows, the garden shimmered with dew. Calm. Unaware. The same peace that made you tense, like the quiet just before a tornado peels back the roof. She didn't know what Harold had told Julian overnight, or if he'd said anything at all. But she knew one thing. There would be fallout. It always came after a man like that felt cornered. Behind her, the house slowly woke. Footsteps overhead, the hiss of the shower pipes, a drawer slamming somewhere. But no one spoke to her. Not the housekeeper, not the butler, not even Marla, the usually chatty kitchen assistant. They moved around her like she was radiation, dangerous, invisible, and best left untouched. Selena didn't flinch. She was used to this kind of silence. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was suspicion soaked in politeness. Julian appeared just before 8. Pressed suit, no tie, no apology. He entered the kitchen like he still owned the air between the walls. And in many ways, he did. "Miss Grant," he said formally. "A moment, please." Selena didn't move. He waited, then added, "In private." She finally turned, setting down her cup. Her fingers still smelled faintly of copper and gauze from the cut on her arm. She followed him into the side library, a narrow room of leather and dark oak, untouched by sunlight or warmth. Julian closed the door, then faced her. "I've been informed," he said coldly, "that my father has updated the structure of his estate." Selena said nothing. "That you've been promoted." He chewed the word like it tasted wrong. "Given authority." Still, she said nothing. Julian stepped closer. "Tell me something honestly. What exactly did you do to earn that trust?" That was the moment. Selena inhaled once, steady. "I stayed," she said quietly, "when everyone else left." Julian's jaw tightened. "You manipulated an old man?" "I cared for him," she snapped. "When your lawyers downsized his care, when your accountant filed mobility support as a non-essential expense, when no one in this house gave a damn if he ever stood again, I stayed." He blinked. She stepped closer. "Don't pretend you're angry about some legal draft. You're angry because he chose someone else. Because for the first time in your life, someone in your bloodline picked truth over legacy, and it wasn't you." That landed. Julian didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just went cold. "I don't trust you," he said. "You were never supposed to," she replied. "You don't know how." Julian turned his back to her. A dismissal, but not a surrender. Hours later, the estate lawyer arrived. An old man with liver spots and a briefcase that looked older than Selena. He didn't speak to her, just nodded once as he passed. Selena watched from the stairwell as Julian led him into the study. The door closed, and for the first time, a chill crept up her spine. Not fear of Julian, but fear of what men like him did when they couldn't control the narrative. That night, Harold didn't come down for dinner. The nurse said he was sleeping off a dizzy spell, nothing serious. But Selena knew better. His episodes were getting worse. Longer silences, flickers of confusion. He was still sharp, but the edges were softening. If Julian was going to fight her in court, if he was going to challenge the new documents, time was no longer neutral. It was on his side, and it was running out. Later that evening, Selena sat in the back greenhouse, the quiet space where Harold first tried to walk again. The moonlight filtered through the glass panes, cold and clear. She opened the envelope again. The paper inside bore her name, her title, and her new responsibilities. But all she could see was the line at the bottom. In recognition of extraordinary care, human dignity, and integrity beyond role. That wasn't just legal language. That was a man trying to make amends for the silence of his own son. At the same time, across the estate, Julian Blackwell sat alone in the West Wing office. The legal briefcase sat open before him. His father's lawyer had laid out everything clearly. If Harold remained of sound mind, the new designation stood. But if Julian could prove otherwise, he stared at a form labeled Petition for Medical Review. All he needed was one doctor to say Harold's judgment had been impaired. Just one. His fingers hovered over the pen. Then something stopped him. A memory. His father, 3 months ago, laughing, struggling to lift a flower pot in the greenhouse. Selena crouched beside him, dirt on her knees, smiling without knowing anyone was watching. It wasn't manipulation. It was real. Julian exhaled, then shoved the paper back into the folder. He wasn't ready for war. Not yet. But deep down, he knew. If he lost his father's name, all he had left was his own. And that might not be enough. 3 days passed, and the house had grown quieter. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind of quiet that warns of a storm still circling overhead. Harold remained mostly in his room. His appetite waned. His hands trembled more often. The nurses said it was fatigue, nothing unexpected. But Selena knew better. His voice was still sharp, but his time was thinning like old paper. Julian stayed out of sight during the day. Rumor among the staff said he'd canceled meetings, called lawyers, fired 2 accountants, and was reviewing financial efficiency reports for the estate. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew what that meant. He was looking for ways to isolate his father's decisions, to prove incompetence, to reverse the change. Selena didn't wait for anyone's approval. She focused her energy elsewhere. Back in the eastern courtyard, behind the disused stables and rusted water tower, was an overgrown plot of land. Dandelions, thorned ivy, broken bricks, and trash. She had seen it every day from the guest wing balcony, and now she saw possibility. One morning, she asked Harold if she could use it. He didn't hesitate. "Turn it into something real," he whispered. And so began what staff would come to call the Roots Project. It started small, clearing dead brush, pulling weeds, sketching ideas on paper napkins. Selena worked alone at first, sleeves rolled, hands in soil. But by the 3rd day, a young kitchen assistant named Carla asked if she could help. Then Devon, the gardener's nephew, brought a bag of compost and refused to leave. By the end of the week, 7 staff members were pitching in, planting, painting, hauling stone. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a resurrection, Julian noticed. Of course he did. He stood at the library window one afternoon, watching Selena laugh with a group of workers as they laid the first foundation boards for a raised bed. She looked steady, centered, not like someone hiding from scandal or angling for attention, like someone building something that would outlast her. It unsettled him. That night, over dinner with a business associate, Julian dropped the first seed of his new narrative. "She's passionate," he said, slicing into a perfectly medium-rare steak. "But it's a little too perfect, don't you think?" His companion, a younger man from the PR world, leaned in. "What do you mean?" Julian sipped his wine. "Helping the elderly, building gardens, giving speeches about dignity. It's practically tailor-made for media redemption." The younger man smirked. "And you think she's planning something?" Julian smiled back. "I think she already has." Back at the estate, Selena stood in front of Harold's bed, showing him sketches of what would eventually become a healing greenhouse. A place for stroke survivors, lonely seniors, and struggling youth to come and work with their hands. Harold studied the plans slowly. "You're doing this without asking for anything," he said, voice faint. "I'm not here to take," she replied. "I'm here to leave something behind." Harold looked at her for a long time. You know he thinks this is about the will. I know. He thinks I'm being manipulated. You're not. I know that too. He paused, then reached for her hand. Selena, if he finds out what else I changed... She stopped him gently. Don't say it, not yet. He nodded, and they sat together in the silence. The next morning, a package arrived for Julian. No sender, just a thick manila envelope marked confidential, internal only. Inside were 3 photographs. Selena kneeling beside Harold with a towel pressed to his back, helping him stretch. A copy of the drafted inheritance clause, highlighted with Selena's name beside a 12% asset allocation. A blurry image of Harold, alone in his study, signing the paperwork. There was no note, no threat, just fuel. Julian stared at the photos for a long time, then closed the envelope and slid it into his drawer. He wouldn't act on it. Not yet. He didn't need fire when shadows could do the same work slower. That weekend, the first seedlings appeared in the Roots Project garden. Tiny green bursts pushing through dirt like quiet survivors. Selena bent down and touched the soil. It was still damp from the morning mist, still soft, still full of promise. Behind her, Carla walked up with a bundle of fresh steaks. You know, the staff is starting to talk. Selena looked up. About what? About why you're still here. Why Mr. Blackwell trusts you more than his own son. Why Julian's been so quiet lately. Selena smiled faintly. Let them talk. Carla hesitated. Is it true that he changed the will? Selena didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, and said, What matters isn't who inherits the land. It's who knows how to grow something in it. The first newspaper article didn't say much. Just a small piece buried halfway down the Sunday local section. Blackwell Estate staff launches healing garden behind historic grounds. It included a blurry photo of Selena standing among wheelbarrows and wood pallets, her sleeves rolled up, hands muddy, sunlight catching the edge of her cheekbone. The caption read, Former caregiver leads new initiative to give back. Julian didn't comment when he saw it. Didn't bring it up at breakfast. Didn't mention the media buzz growing around what had once been just a side project in a forgotten corner of the estate. But he noticed, because when people stop talking about you and start talking about someone else on your land, silence starts to feel like erosion. Selena kept her head down. She hadn't asked for attention, hadn't invited the article. It was Devin, the gardener's nephew, who'd snapped a photo and tagged a community page. A reporter picked it up from there. Suddenly, volunteers started showing up. Not many at first. A retired nurse, a boy in a wheelchair, a single father who said he used to know Harold back in the war. Then came the gifts. Donated seeds, tools, lumber. Then hands. Lots of hands. Different colors, different ages, different scars. Each person brought something. Each one left something behind. Inside the main house, Harold sat in his sunroom with the window cracked open just enough to catch the laughter drifting from the back fields. It was a sound he hadn't heard in decades. He turned to Rosalind, the head housekeeper. You hear that? She nodded. Sounds like life. Sounds like forgiveness, he said quietly. She didn't ask who he meant. Julian began walking the perimeter of the Roots Project every morning. At first, just to observe. Hands in pockets, sunglasses on, the distance of a man who wanted to look concerned but not engaged. But then, he started lingering, asking questions. Who built that ramp? Where'd those benches come from? One day, he found Selena measuring the shade under a sycamore tree. What's that for? He asked. She didn't turn. Memory space? He blinked. Meaning? A place for people to sit and remember the ones they buried. Not everyone gets a headstone. Julian didn't respond. But the next morning, lumber for benches was delivered. No invoice, no note. It was Carla who first called him out. You watching because you're curious? She asked, passing him a rake. Or waiting for something to go wrong? Julian smirked. Do I look that paranoid? You look like a man trying not to feel what this place is doing to him. He didn't answer, but he stayed. That weekend, Selena hosted the garden's first community lunch. No speeches, no agenda. Just pots of soup, baskets of cornbread, lemonade in mason jars. People came, more than she expected. Some she didn't know, some she'd met only once. But all of them brought stories. A teenage girl shared how she used to come to the Blackwell Wall to cry when her mom was in the hospital. A veteran placed a single coin under the tomato vine. For the ones who didn't come back, a 6-year-old boy named Malik handed Selena a crayon drawing of her watering flowers. "You look like magic," he said. She blinked hard and smiled. "You have no idea." Later that night, as the sun dipped behind the hedges, Julian sat beside Harold in the garden's first finished seating area. "You remember when I was 10? Julian said quietly. "And I tried to grow sunflowers in the front lawn." Harold chuckled. "You watered them with orange soda. They died in 2 days. You were furious, blamed the sun." Julian laughed for the first time in weeks. He looked at the flowers blooming around him now. Lavender, thyme, squash blossoms. Real. Alive. "How'd she do this?" he asked aloud. Harold didn't answer right away, then said, "She didn't ask permission." That night, Julian stood alone by the back fence, watching as volunteers finished cleaning up. Selena passed him without a word. He called after her. "Why didn't you quit?" She stopped but didn't turn. "I did," she said, "but your father wouldn't let me." He took a step closer. "I mean after I humiliated you, accused you." Selena turned then, face unreadable in the fading light, because there was still something here worth protecting. "Like him?" Julian asked. She shook her head. "Like truth." Up in his room, Harold opened an old leather-bound journal and began to write. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you teach people to carry forward when no one is watching." The story broke on a Tuesday, not in some tabloid or blog post, but on a respected regional news site, just below a feature about rising real estate prices in the area. Selena Grant named in revised Blackwell will. Sources confirm former housekeeper now holds partial inheritance rights. The article was short, measured, just enough to raise eyebrows without making accusations. But it didn't need to scream. It had already started a fire. Within hours, the estate staff shifted. Conversations stopped when Selena entered the room. People who once helped in the garden now said they were too busy. The air grew thick, not with judgment, but with carefully disguised speculation. Julian, for once, wasn't the one feeding it. He was strangely silent, no confrontations, no commands, but Selena could feel the change in temperature around him. This wasn't rage, it was calculation. Harold, meanwhile, refused to let the paper reach his bedside. But Rosalind told him anyway. "You should have expected this," she said gently. He nodded. "I did. And I still did the right thing." She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "Then you'd better be ready to defend it." That night, Selena sat alone in the garden, the news article open on her phone. She scrolled through the comments section. Not because she needed validation, but because she wanted to know how people would twist the truth. They didn't disappoint. This was her plan all along. Gold digger disguised as a healer. No wonder Julian snapped. He should have sued her years ago. Selena put the phone down, not because she was broken, but because she refused to feed a machine that thrived on tearing women like her apart. Julian finally spoke the next morning. He approached while she was cutting back lavender along the front row of the garden. "You knew this would happen," he said flatly. She didn't look up. "Eventually, yes." He paused. "Did you ask for it?" "Ask for what? The will?" She straightened slowly, eyes level. "No." Julian studied her for a beat. "Then why didn't you decline it?" "Because your father is a man, not a property line," she said. "He gave something of value, not because I earned it, but because I restored it." Julian didn't argue, but he didn't walk away either. In the days that followed, the Roots Project began to strain under the weight of whispers. A few volunteers dropped out. A city official postponed a permit approval. A donor quietly pulled funding. The garden didn't wither, but it stopped blooming the way it had. Selena brought the issue to Harold one afternoon. "He's not saying anything publicly," she told him, "but he doesn't need to. All he has to do is let the rumors grow." Harold sighed, staring out the window. "That's how my generation learned to kill reputations. Not with fire, with fog." She smiled sadly. "He's inherited your strategy." Harold's face hardened. "He's inherited my name. That's not the same thing." He shifted painfully in his chair. "You need to be ready, Selena. They're going to push harder. Let them." "No," Harold said, voice low. "They won't come for your hands. They'll come for your past." Selena stiffened. "I've made peace with it." "They haven't," he said. "They'll dig up everything, twist it, sell it back to the public with your name at the top." She looked him dead in the eye. "Then maybe it's time they heard the truth from me instead." That evening, Julian met with two of his father's old legal advisors. It was quiet, behind closed doors, over whiskey and controlled tones. They discussed strategy, media timing, public sentiment. "How do we handle the optics if she speaks first?" one of them asked. Julian didn't blink. "We control the platform, not the message. If we can't stop her, we'll surround her. And if she doesn't go quietly?" Julian swirled his glass. "Then we make her loud enough that the world stops listening." But not everyone in the Blackwell circle was willing to keep the silence. The next morning, Rosalind knocked gently on Selena's door. "I think it's time you saw something," she said. She handed over an old envelope, sealed with wax, marked with Harold's initials. "I found this last year when cleaning his desk. I didn't read it, but I think it's for you." Selena opened it slowly, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not legal, not strategic, just a father's voice, unfiltered. "If you're reading this, I've likely failed you in some way again. But know this. I saw what you did. I saw how you walked with me when no one else would. I saw the way you brought me back to myself. And for that, I gave you a piece of what the world once took from me. Not because you asked, because you reminded me I still had something left to give." Selena sat down slowly on the edge of her bed, eyes damp. Not with pain, but with clarity. The game had changed. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about who got to define worth, and Selena was done letting other people answer that for her. The sun hung low behind the Blackwell estate, casting long shadows across the garden paths. It was the kind of evening where everything felt heavy. The dirt, the silence, the things still unsaid. Selena stood in the greenhouse with the letter from Harold still folded in her pocket. She hadn't told anyone she was going to speak. Not Julian, not Harold, not even Rosalind. But the moment had arrived, and it was hers. She walked toward the wooden platform they'd built for community events, a small raised stage beside the sycamore. At this hour, the volunteers were winding down, but word had already spread. Selena was going to speak. By the time she stepped up, there were at least 50 people gathered, some from the community, some from the estate, a few with cameras, most with questions. Selena looked out at the crowd, her hands steady, her breath even. Then she began, "I'm not a politician, not a CEO, not a name on a foundation plaque." She paused. "I was a waitress, a night shift cleaner, a part-time home aide, a woman who applied to this estate because her mother's insurance ran out and she needed a job that would let her send money back home." More silence. "I never asked for power. I was given responsibility. And when Mr. Blackwell trusted me with more than that, I carried it like I carry everything, with both hands and all my heart." She scanned the crowd. "People think I took something, that I manipulated my way into a legacy, that I wanted the money. A beat. If that were true, I would have left a long time ago. Because what I got in return for that trust wasn't a mansion or a paycheck. It was being treated like a criminal again. like a story that writes itself the moment a black woman stands too close to someone powerful. She let that sink in. "You want to know what I did to deserve it?" she asked, her voice calm. "I walked with a man who forgot how to walk. I held his hand when the staff was too busy. I wiped his brow when no one else would. And in that act, I saw something he hadn't seen in decades." She tapped her chest once. Humanity. The wind shifted. Even the camera shutters paused. Julian stood at the back of the crowd, arms folded. He hadn't tried to stop the speech. He could have, but some part of him needed to hear it too, Selena continued. "I've made mistakes in my life. I've paid for them. And I'm not asking anyone to erase my past." She looked into the camera lens directly. But if a woman's worth is judged solely by her history, and not by her healing, then this city has more broken soil than anyone's ready to admit. A ripple of response from the audience. Some clapped softly, some murmured, "Amen." Then she said, "This garden isn't mine. It belongs to every hand that puts seed to earth here. Every grandmother who brings tea and stories. Every child who learns how to grow something instead of break it." Another pause. "But if you want me gone, if you think this project isn't real, come take it. Dig up every root, tear down every trellis, cut the funding, strip my name from the records." Her voice sharpened. "Just don't pretend you're doing it for integrity, because I've bled more truth into this soil than some people bleed in a lifetime of boardrooms." The crowd was quiet now, not stunned, moved. Then Harold's voice cut through the air like gravel on glass. "She didn't steal anything." All eyes turned. The old man sat in a wheelchair under the sycamore, a blanket draped across his knees, his eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "I gave it to her," he said, "not because I was old, or confused, or manipulated." His voice trembled. "But because she reminded me what legacy is actually supposed to mean. Not money, not buildings, but how we treat each other when no one's looking." Tears glistened in a few eyes. Harold's hand rose, pointing towards Selena. "She's the only person in this house who never treated me like I was dying." Julian's eyes fell. He couldn't hold his father's gaze. After the speech, people lingered. They didn't flood Selena with questions. They just stood closer, touched her shoulder, nodded, left food, left notes, left something real. Even the press backed off, quietly acknowledging this wasn't scandal, this was restoration. Later that night, Julian knocked on her door. She opened it. He didn't speak at first, just held out a folded article, the one from the paper that started everything. "I fed it," he said. "I didn't write it, but I let it grow." Selena took it, looked at him. "Why?" He didn't hesitate. "Because if people doubted you, then they'd forget how much they doubted me." He waited. She didn't yell, didn't close the door. She simply asked, "And what now?" Julian looked down at the ground, then back up. "Now, we dig deeper. For the truth. And for what comes next." It started with a seed, not the kind buried in soil, though plenty had been, but a seed of perception. A woman with a past. A billionaire with a bruised ego. A father with fading strength. And a garden that grew in spite of all of it. Weeks passed, and with them came small victories. The city council approved historic protection for the eastern garden plots. That meant the Roots project could not be bulldozed or sold, not without public review. Local businesses donated lumber, mulch, and 24 solar lights. A university reached out, asking if Selena would speak at their urban agriculture program. The whispers faded. Not all of them, but enough. One Sunday morning, as dew still clung to the tomatoes, Selena walked the rows with Harold. He was thinner now, quieter, but still sharp in flashes. She helped him sit near the herb beds, beneath a canopy of linen someone had hung to block the sun. "You ever think," Harold said, breaking the silence, "about what this place would have looked like without you?" She smiled faintly. "Honestly, I thought I'd be gone before the basil sprouted." He chuckled. "You almost were." She looked at him. "Why did you really put me in the will?" He didn't hesitate. "Because legacy isn't who inherits. It's who carries what you couldn't finish. Selena nodded. And what is it you couldn't finish? Harold exhaled. A life I'm proud of. That afternoon, Julian called a press meeting. Not with reporters, with the garden team. He stood awkwardly near the compost bin. No suit, no tie, just sleeves rolled, voice steady. I've spent most of my life thinking value meant control, he began. That to protect something I had to own it, dominate it, define it. He looked at Selena. I was wrong. No one interrupted. I've watched this place bloom under hands that never once asked who was in charge. And I've watched my father become more himself here than in any boardroom he ever built. A pause. Today, I'm signing full operational and funding rights of the Roots Project over to an independent community board, headed by Ms. Selena Grant. Gasps. Then applause, not thunderous, but earned. Selena stepped forward, surprised. Julian extended the paperwork. She didn't take it immediately. Why now? She asked. He didn't dodge. Because if I don't start rebuilding what I broke, I don't deserve the name I carry. That night, Selena sat under the trellis arch where the vines now bloomed thick with honeysuckle. Carla brought her a mug of warm tea. I used to think this place was cursed, Carla whispered. Selena raised an eyebrow. Too much history, too many ghosts. Selena looked around. Maybe the ghosts just needed someone to listen. Carla smiled. You think people will forget what happened? Selena shook her head. No, but they'll remember how we responded, that's what matters. Days later, Harold passed quietly in his sleep. No pain, no drama, just peace. Selena was the first to find him. She sat with him for almost an hour before anyone else came. She folded the blanket over his chest, closed the window, turned on his jazz station, and whispered, Thank you. His funeral was held in the garden. No black suits, just earth tones, denim, aprons stained with soil. Every guest brought something to plant. Basil, lilies, rosemary. A tree was added in the center, beneath the sycamore. Julian gave a short eulogy, but it was Selena who read his last journal entry aloud. If you ever wonder what your legacy is, don't check your will. Check the hands that show up when you're gone. The Roots Project kept growing. 3 months later, the city approved expansion into the vacant lot across the street. A youth greenhouse was added. Then a free farmer's market stand. Then a memorial bench for Harold. Selena never asked for her name on anything, but someone painted it anyway, in soft white letters on the old tool shed door. Here she rooted us. Julian visited less frequently now, but he always came on the 9th of each month, the day the foundation papers were signed. He never stayed long, but always helped water the fig trees before leaving, and always left behind a single envelope at Harold's bench. No name, no message, just a seed packet. One evening, long after the garden had emptied, Selena walked the rows with a flashlight, checking the fences. She found Malik, the 6-year-old, sitting cross-legged near the cucumbers. What are you doing out here? She asked, crouching. He looked up at her, eyes wide and sure. Waiting. For what? He smiled. For the next good thing to grow. She reached down and took his hand. Together they walked back toward the shed, the sky above them blooming with stars, the ground beneath them still holding every truth they'd ever planted. Some stories don't end with courtroom victories or grand applause. Some end quietly, beneath trees that remember, in gardens that forgive, in hands that keep planting long after the storm has passed. Selena Grant didn't set out to build a movement. She simply refused to walk away when everyone else did. And in doing so, she reminded the world that legacy isn't about who holds the land. It's about who loves it enough to heal it. Truth was buried. Power tried to dig it out. But the roots held. Because justice, like a seed, doesn't always grow loud. But it grows. And when it does, it remembers exactly who watered it first.